When I landed at O'Hare Airport after a week-long work trip, I was exhausted, hungry, and counting the minutes until I could finally sleep in my own bed. Instead, I came home to find my entire life piled on the front lawn. My clothes, my books, my office equipment, even the antique jewelry box my grandmother had left me. At first, I thought my house had been robbed. Then I saw the note taped to the front door. A single sheet of pink paper. 3 short sentences. You don't live here anymore. The locks have been changed. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's story is an emotional tale of betrayal, favoritism, family secrets, and a comeback nobody saw coming. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if a family member threw you out of your own house, would you fight back immediately, or stay silent and wait for the perfect moment? Now let's get into today's story. My name is Serena Holloway, and for most of my life my younger sister had one special talent. She could create chaos and somehow convince everyone else it was somebody else's fault. Her name was Brianna. She was 3 years younger than me and had spent our entire childhood wrapped in a protective bubble created by our parents. If Brianna forgot to study for a test, the teacher was unfair. If Brianna quit another job, the manager was toxic. If Brianna spent money she didn't have, life was simply too expensive. There was always an excuse, always a reason. And somehow everyone accepted it. Everyone except me. By 34, I had built a successful career as a corporate event planner in Chicago. The job required long hours and frequent travel, but I loved it. I had worked hard for everything I owned, especially my house. 7 years earlier, I bought a beautiful 3-bedroom home on a quiet tree-lined street. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every payment, every repair, every improvement, I earned it myself. Unfortunately, my house eventually became Brianna's solution to another one of her problems. 2 years before this story began, she showed up crying on my doorstep. Her latest relationship had ended. She'd lost her apartment. And according to her, she had nowhere to go. Just a few months, she promised. I swear, Serena. I just need time to get back on my feet. I should have known better. But she was my sister. So I let her move into the guest room. The first few weeks were fine. Then little things started changing. She took over more space. Started inviting friends over. Made decisions without asking. Acted less like a guest and more like a homeowner. One evening I came home from work and found my living room completely rearranged. What happened in here? I asked. Brianna smiled proudly. Doesn't it look better? You moved all my furniture. You're welcome. That was Brianna. Every boundary became a suggestion. Every favor became an entitlement. Whenever I complained, my parents immediately defended her. She's family, Serena. She's going through a hard time. Try to be understanding. Eventually I stopped arguing. But deep down I noticed something disturbing. Brianna had stopped calling it my house. She started calling it our house. The first time I heard it, I laughed. The 10th time it wasn't funny anymore. Then came the phone call that changed everything. My company landed a major corporate convention contract in Seattle. The project was huge. My boss needed me there for 6 days. Think you can handle it? He asked. Absolutely. The trip could lead to a promotion. Maybe even a regional leadership position. I accepted immediately. The night before I left, I informed Brianna. I'll be gone until Saturday. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay. Can you collect the mail while I'm gone? Sure. Her answer felt oddly cold. I noticed it, but I ignored it. The next morning I left for Seattle. I had no idea that while I was working 12-hour days to build my future, someone back home was already planning to steal it. The Seattle trip turned out to be one of the busiest weeks of my career. From sunrise until late evening I was coordinating schedules, solving problems, and making sure every detail of the convention ran perfectly. By Thursday my boss pulled me aside. Serena, the client loves your work. I smiled. That's good to hear. No, he said. It's better than good. The executive team is talking about promoting you. For a moment I forgot how exhausted I was. I had spent years proving myself. Years missing birthdays, holidays, and weekends. Hearing those words felt like validation for every sacrifice I had made. That night I called my parents to share the news. My mother sounded distracted. That's nice, honey. Nice. Usually she would have spent 10 minutes bragging to everyone she knew. Instead, she quickly changed the subject. Have you talked to Brianna today? The question caught me off guard. Not really. She seems stressed. I frowned. About what? I'm sure it's nothing. The conversation ended a few minutes later, leaving me with a strange feeling I couldn't explain. Over the next 2 days, things became even stranger. Brianna barely responded to my texts. The family group chat suddenly went silent. Even my father, who normally sent daily sports updates, disappeared. Something felt off. But I was too busy to think much about it. By Saturday afternoon, I was finally heading home. The flight landed just before sunset. As I drove through my neighborhood, I felt relieved. The trip was over. The convention was a success. A promotion seemed likely. For the first time in months, life felt like it was moving in the right direction. Then I turned onto my street. And everything changed. At first, I thought I was looking at the wrong house. Cardboard boxes covered the lawn. Furniture sat near the sidewalk. Clothes were piled inside plastic storage bins. My dining room chairs were stacked beside the mailbox. My stomach dropped. I slammed on the brakes. No. The word escaped before I even realized I'd spoken. I jumped out of the car. The closer I got, the worse it became. Every box contained my belongings. Family photos. Kitchen supplies. Books. Work files. Everything. Then I noticed the pink paper attached to the front door. My hands trembled as I walked toward it. The note read, "You don't live here anymore. The locks have been changed. Don't call me Brianna." I stared at those words. Once, twice, 3 times. They never changed. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My sister had actually thrown me out of my own house. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A text message. From my mother. "Please don't create drama when you get home. Brianna needs stability right now." I felt physically sick. Not because of the note. Because my mother clearly knew about it. He knew. And she had said nothing. I looked at the house. Lights glowed behind the curtains. Someone moved past the front window. Then the door opened. Brianna stepped outside. She wasn't crying. She wasn't embarrassed. She looked comfortable. Like she belonged there. "Hey," she said casually. "Hey." That was all she had to say? I stared at her. "What is this?" She crossed her arms. I thought the note explained everything. My pulse hammered in my ears. "You threw my belongings onto the lawn." "Our belongings," she corrected. I blinked. "What?" "Our house." The words hit me harder than I expected. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. "Brianna, this house belongs to me." Her expression immediately hardened. "You always say that." "Because it's true." "No," she snapped. "You just like reminding everyone that you have more money." I looked at her in disbelief. "Are you serious?" Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. "My father." He stepped onto the porch beside her. Then my mother appeared. The sight nearly broke my heart. Because neither of them looked surprised. Neither looked concerned. They looked prepared. Like they'd rehearsed this. My mother folded her arms. "Serena, we can discuss this calmly." "Discuss what?" "The living situation." I stared at her. "The living situation?" "Yes." I looked from my mother to my father and back again. Slowly, painfully, the truth became clear. This wasn't Brianna acting alone. My parents were involved. And whatever was happening had been planned long before I got home. Then my father said something that made my blood run cold. "Maybe it's time we tell Serena the truth." For a few seconds nobody spoke. The evening air felt strangely heavy. I stood in my own driveway surrounded by boxes while my parents and sister stared at me from the porch like I was the outsider. My father cleared his throat. "Serena, this situation has been building for a long time." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A situation?" I repeated. "Dad, she threw me out of my own house." My mother immediately stepped in. "Please stop saying that." I stared at her. "Stop saying what?" "That it's your house." For a moment I honestly wondered if I was losing my mind. Because nothing about this conversation felt real. I pointed toward the front door. "The mortgage is in my name." Nobody answered. "The property taxes are in my name." Still nothing. "The insurance is in my name." Brianna rolled her eyes dramatically. There you go again. There I go again doing what? Acting like money is the only thing that matters. I almost laughed. Except nothing about the situation was funny anymore. My father took a step forward. Brianna has lived here for 2 years. So, she considers this her home. My jaw tightened. She was supposed to stay for 3 months. Circumstances changed. That sentence. That exact sentence. I had heard it my entire life whenever Brianna wanted something. Circumstances changed. Rules changed. Plans changed. Expectations changed. Everything changed except the fact that everyone expected me to sacrifice. My mother sighed dramatically. You know your sister has struggled. And somehow that's my fault? No one said that. Then what exactly are you saying? Nobody answered immediately. The silence told me everything. Eventually Brianna spoke. I deserve some stability too. I stared at her. Then get your own place. The look on her face instantly darkened. There it is. There what is? The real Serena. I blinked. The one who thinks she's better than everyone. I couldn't believe it. For years I had paid the bills, covered expenses, given her a place to live. And somehow I was still the villain. My mother suddenly stepped closer. Your sister isn't asking for much. I looked at her. She changed the locks. She felt threatened. Actually laughed. Threatened? I had been 6 dates away. The absurdity of the accusation almost made me dizzy. Then Brianna delivered the sentence that finally explained everything. We think it's only fair if you let me keep the house. The world seemed to stop. For several seconds I genuinely thought I had misheard her. Keep the house. She nodded. Yes. I stared at my parents. Neither of them looked shocked. Neither corrected her. That was the moment I realized how deep this went. This wasn't some emotional outburst. This wasn't a temporary disagreement. They had actually convinced themselves that my house should become Brianna's house. My father folded his arms. You travel constantly. What does that have to do with anything? You barely spend time here. I couldn't believe the argument I was hearing. So because I work I lose my house? Don't twist our words. My mother looked almost irritated now. Why can't you be more understanding? I looked around at my belongings scattered across the lawn. The neighbors watching from their windows. The family standing together against me. And something inside me finally changed. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. For years I had believed that if I worked harder, helped more and stayed patient, eventually my family would treat me fairly. Standing there I finally understood the truth. That day was never coming. Because every sacrifice I made simply convinced them I would make another one. My phone buzzed again. A message from my boss. Normally I would have ignored it. But I glanced down. The text contained only one sentence. Call me when you can. I have incredible news. For a brief second I almost smiled. Because while my family was busy trying to take everything from me, the rest of my life was still moving forward. Meanwhile theirs was built entirely around taking from other people. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I looked directly at Brianna. You really think this is going to work? Her confidence wavered slightly. Why wouldn't it? I didn't answer. Instead I calmly picked up one of my boxes. Then another. Then another. My mother frowned. What are you doing? Leaving. Brianna looked surprised. You're not going to fight? I looked at her. For the first time all evening I smiled. A small smile. A quiet smile. The kind that made people uncomfortable. No, I said softly. Not tonight. Then I loaded the last box into my car and drove away. The entire family expected a battle. A screaming match. Police cars. Lawyers. Chaos. What they got instead was silence. And they had no idea how dangerous that silence was about to become. Because 2 hours later, sitting alone in a hotel room, I opened an email from my mortgage company. An email that should never have existed. Attached to it was a document showing that someone had recently requested information about transferring ownership of my property. And the name listed on the request wasn't mine. It was Brianna's. I stared at the screen for nearly a minute. Then I read the document again. And again. The name didn't change. Serena Holloway. My younger sister had actually requested ownership information for my house. Not rented. Not borrowed. Not shared. I leaned back in the hotel chair and felt something strange. Not shock. Not anger. Relief. Because for the first time since arriving home, I had proof that this wasn't some emotional misunderstanding. This had been planned. Carefully. Deliberately. And now I had a paper trail. The next morning I called the mortgage company. After answering a series of security questions, a representative confirmed what I'd already suspected. Someone had contacted them several weeks earlier asking about ownership transfers. Several weeks. That meant Brianna had started this while I was still living in the house. While she smiled at me during dinner. While she thanked me for letting her stay there. While she hugged me goodbye before my trip. The betrayal hit differently now. Because it wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. I thanked the representative and ended the call. Then I did something my family never expected. Nothing. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Brianna. I didn't post anything online. I didn't show up at the house. I simply disappeared. For 5 days. And during those 5 days my silence started making everyone uncomfortable. The first call came from my mother. I ignored it. Then another. And another. Voicemail after voicemail appeared. None of them sounded concerned about me. They sounded nervous. By the end of the week even my father was calling. That never happened. Dad hated phone conversations. If he was reaching out repeatedly something had changed. So I stayed silent. Meanwhile I was busy. Very busy. I met with an attorney named Lauren Mitchell. A woman with sharp eyes and absolutely no patience for nonsense. After listening to my story she opened a folder and said something that immediately got my attention. Serena, do you want the good news or the bad news first? I sighed. Bad news. Lauren nodded. Your family has convinced themselves they're entitled to your property. That much I figured out. The good news. She slid a document across the desk. They don't have a legal leg to stand on. For the first time in days I smiled. Everything was in my name. Mortgage. Insurance. Taxes. Utilities. Everything. Legally speaking the situation was simple. Emotionally it was a disaster. But legally? Simple. Lauren looked through additional records and suddenly frowned. Interesting. What? Your sister has debt. I blinked. Debt. A lot of debt. My stomach tightened. That wasn't surprising. Brianna had always been terrible with money. But Lauren's expression suggested something worse. How much? She turned the screen toward me. The number made my eyes widen. Credit cards. Personal loans. Collections. Late payments. The total was far higher than I expected. Much higher. Suddenly everything started making sense. The entitlement. The urgency. The house. Brianna wasn't looking for stability. She was looking for an escape route. And she had chosen my house as the solution. That afternoon another piece of the puzzle appeared. A neighbor named Mrs. Grayson called me. She'd lived across the street for years. We weren't close but we were friendly. Serena, she said carefully, I think you should know something. My pulse quickened. What is it? There have been a lot of people at your house. People. Different cars every night. My stomach sank. Mrs. Grayson continued. Parties. Loud music. Visitors. Parties. While I was paying the mortgage. While my sister was pretending she needed help. I closed my eyes. The house wasn't being treated like a home. It was being treated like a prize. A prize Brianna thought she'd already won. The next day Lauren called. Her voice sounded unusually serious. Serena. What happened? I found something. I sat upright. What? There was another inquiry filed regarding your property. My heart started pounding. Another one? Yes. Pause. Then Lauren said the words that changed everything. This one included supporting documents. I frowned. What kind of documents? Lauren took a breath. The kind that appeared to show family consent. The room suddenly felt colder. Family consent. That could only mean one thing. My parents. Slowly, carefully, I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Are you telling me my parents were involved? Lauren was silent for several seconds. Then she said, I think we're about to find out exactly how involved they were. For the next 48 hours I barely slept. Every time my phone rang I hoped it was Lauren with answers. And every time it wasn't my frustration grew. The hardest part wasn't losing access to my house. It was realizing how many people I could no longer trust. My sister's betrayal hurt. But my parents' involvement cut much deeper. Because parents are supposed to protect you, not help someone steal from you. On Monday morning, Lauren finally called. "Serena, I need you to come to my office." The tone of her voice immediately made my stomach tighten. "Is it bad?" "It's complicated." An hour later, I was sitting across from her desk. Several documents were spread out between us. Lauren pointed toward one of them. "This is the paperwork submitted during the ownership inquiry." I looked down. The signatures at the bottom nearly stopped my heart. My mother's name. My father's name. And Brianna's. I felt sick. "They signed this?" Lauren nodded slowly. "It appears so." For several seconds I couldn't speak. I just stared. The signatures looked real. The handwriting looked familiar. Everything looked authentic. My father had actually participated. The man who taught me how to ride a bicycle. The man who used to tell me honesty mattered. He had signed documents connected to taking my home. I swallowed hard. What exactly were they trying to do? Lauren folded her hands. "My best guess." I waited. "They believed that if enough family members supported Brianna's claim, eventually you'd give up." I stared at her. "That's insane." "I agree." The worst part. Sounded exactly like something my family would do. Not because they were evil. Because they were convinced Brianna deserved special treatment. The same treatment she'd received her entire life. For years, every bad decision she'd made had been softened by someone else's sacrifice. This time they expected that someone to be me. Only this time I wasn't cooperating. That afternoon, Lauren officially filed legal action. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just facts. Property records. Mortgage records. Ownership records. Evidence. Lots of evidence. The response from my family was immediate. Within hours my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 13 times. My father called 6. Even distant relatives started reaching out. Apparently Brianna had spent weeks telling everyone a completely different story. According to her version, I had promised her the house years ago. According to her version, I had suddenly changed my mind. According to her version, she was the victim. I almost laughed. Almost. Then something unexpected happened. The lies started falling apart. One by one. A cousin called me privately. "Serena, none of this makes sense." "What doesn't?" "Brianna said the house was hers." "It isn't." I figured. That conversation became 10 conversations. Then 20. People started asking questions. Questions Brianna couldn't answer. Questions my parents couldn't answer. Simple questions. If the house belonged to Brianna, why wasn't her name on anything? Why did Serena pay the mortgage? Why did Serena pay the taxes? Why did Serena pay for every repair? Suddenly the story wasn't holding together anymore. The pressure started shifting. And Brianna hated it. A few days later she finally called me herself. The first time since I found the note. I answered. Neither of us spoke immediately. Then she said, "You've turned everyone against me." Actually laughed. The irony was unbelievable. "I haven't talked to anyone." "That's a lie." "It isn't." She sounded frustrated. Desperate. For the first time I heard uncertainty in her voice. Because deep down she knew the truth. Facts don't care about feelings. And facts were destroying her story. Then she said something that shocked me. "You could stop all of this." I waited. "Just let me stay." There was the real goal. Not fairness. Not family. Not understanding. The house. Always the house. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. No. Silence. Then she whispered. "You've changed." I thought about that for a moment. Maybe she was right. Because the old Serena would have felt guilty. The old Serena would have apologized. The old Serena would have sacrificed herself to keep everyone happy. But that Serena was gone. I didn't change, Brianna. My voice stayed calm. I just finally stopped letting people take from me. She hung up. 3 days later, Lauren called with the news we'd been waiting for. The court hearing had been scheduled. Everything was moving forward. Fast. And according to Lauren, the evidence overwhelmingly favored me. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt hopeful. Then Lauren added one more sentence. A sentence that made my pulse jump. There's something else. What? We discovered why Brianna was so desperate to keep the house. I sat forward. What do you mean? Lauren looked directly at me. Your sister isn't just in debt. Pause. Then she delivered the bombshell. She's being sued by multiple creditors. My stomach dropped. Because suddenly I understood. This was never about having a place to live. It was about survival. And if the truth came out in court, Brianna wasn't just going to lose the house. She could lose everything. The court hearing took place 3 weeks later. By then, the entire situation had become impossible for my family to control. Too many questions had been asked. Too many documents had surfaced. Too many lies had unraveled. For the first time in her life, Brianna couldn't charm her way out of a problem. And she couldn't blame someone else for it either. The morning of the hearing, I arrived early with Lauren. My hands were steady, which surprised me. A month earlier, I had been standing in my driveway staring at a pink note taped to my front door. Now I was walking into court with a folder full of evidence. Life can change quickly when the truth finally gets a chance to speak. A few minutes later, my parents entered the courtroom. They looked exhausted, older somehow. My mother avoided eye contact. My father stared at the floor. Then Brianna arrived. For the first time since all of this began, she didn't look confident. She looked terrified. And honestly, I felt sad. Not because she was suffering. Because it never had to reach this point. Every warning had been ignored. Every opportunity to take responsibility had been wasted. The hearing itself moved quickly. The facts were simple. The property belonged to me. Every official document confirmed it. Mortgage records, tax records, insurance records, utility bills, bank statements. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. I owned the house. Not Brianna. Not my parents. Me. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. Then came the questions. Questions my sister couldn't answer. Questions my parents couldn't answer. Questions that destroyed their entire story. If Brianna owned the house, why wasn't her name on any legal documents? If the property had been promised to her, where was the written agreement? If she truly believed she had rights to it, why had she changed the locks while I was away? Every answer sounded weaker than the one before. Then Lauren introduced the financial records. The courtroom became very quiet. Because suddenly Brianna's motivation was obvious. The debt. The lawsuits. The unpaid loans. The collection notices. Everything. The house wasn't a home. It was an asset. An asset she hoped to control before her financial problems caught up with her. And then came the moment that changed everything. My father asked to speak. The entire room turned toward him. For several seconds he simply sat there, looking tired, defeated. Finally he stood. And admitted the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He confessed that they knew Brianna was in serious financial trouble. He admitted they had hoped I would eventually give in. He admitted they believed I could afford to lose the house more easily than Brianna could afford to lose her future. The words hit hard, because they confirmed what I'd secretly known my entire life. They expected sacrifice from me because they always had. The difference was that this time I refused. When the hearing ended, the judge ruled completely in my favor. Ownership remained exclusively mine. The locks had to be restored. My sister was ordered to vacate the property. And several additional legal consequences followed regarding the unauthorized actions she'd taken. Just like that, it was over. Months of lies collapsed in a single afternoon. Outside the courthouse, Brianna finally approached me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked quietly, "Are you happy now?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. The angry sister. The entitled sister. The favorite child. And underneath all of that, I saw something else. Someone who had spent her entire life believing someone would always rescue her. Until one day nobody could. This was never about being happy, I said. It was about accountability. She looked away. For once she had no argument. No excuse. No one left to blame. A few months later I sold the house. Not because I had to. Because I wanted a fresh start. The place carried too many memories. Too much hurt. Too much betrayal. I purchased a beautiful home closer to the city and focused on the promotion I'd earned during that work trip. Yes, the promotion happened. In fact, it came with a salary increase that completely changed my career. For the first time in years, my life felt peaceful. As for my parents, our relationship eventually improved. But it was never the same. Trust, once broken, doesn't magically return. It has to be rebuilt. And some cracks never fully disappear. Brianna and I rarely speak now. Not out of hatred. Just distance. Healthy distance. The kind I should have created years earlier. Sometimes people ask why I stayed silent when I found that note. Why I didn't scream. Why I didn't fight in the driveway. Why I didn't give my family the confrontation they expected. The answer is simple. Because silence gave me something anger never could. Time. Time to gather facts. Time to uncover the truth. Time to let people reveal exactly who they were. And in the end, that silence became my greatest strength. The day I returned from my work trip, my sister thought she had taken everything from me. What she didn't realize was that she had actually given me something priceless. The courage to stop sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me.